Welcome in, everybody. Ready for a deep dive into the digital world? We're going to be focusing on how we learn and teach in a world that seems to be more and more shaped by technology every day.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating how quickly things are changing.
It really is.
I mean, look at the stuff you sent over to look at for today.
Like those excerpts from Session 8 Technology.pdf.
Right?
And the data from Pew Research about millennials and their digital habits.
It's like all these sources are pointing to these same big questions.
Like, are there these, digital tribes forming?
Oh, yeah.
Like, you got your digital evangelists over here.
And the digital Luddites over there.
Right. And how is this all playing out across different generations?
That's a big one.
It is. I mean, think about it.
And then there's this whole concept of digital pedagogies.
What even are those?
Right. Like, why is everyone suddenly talking about them?
So many questions.
So little time. But I think we can at least start to unpack some of this stuff today.
Let's do it. Where should we even begin?
Well, I think that Pew Research data is a good place to start.
Okay. Yeah. What were some of the big takeaways from that?
One thing that really jumped out at me was just how differently millennials engage with technology compared to older generations.
Oh, yeah. Like, it's not even close.
Right. Like night and day.
Give me an example.
Okay, so they found that like 32% of millennials watched an online video in the past 24 hours,
Okay.
but only 7% of the silent generation had Bamber.
Wow.
That's huge.
It is. And you know what? I think that actually ties in perfectly with some of the stuff we were just talking about from the Session 8 document.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Remember how I was talking about the digital natives versus digital immigrants?
Right.
Well, I think that Pew data is like real world evidence of that concept in action.
Makes sense.
Like, think about it.
Did you grow up playing outside with your friends, or were you glued to a screen?
Good question.
Right. And how has that shaped the way you learn and process information?
Well, for me
I
personally.
mean, I'm definitely more of a digital native.
Yeah, me too. Like, I can't imagine life without the internet.
Right. But it's interesting to think about how people who didn't grow up with this technology experience it.
It is. And speaking of different experiences, you know what else I thought was really interesting in the Session 8 document? How it talked about this potential clash between legacy content and teaching methods versus the future of education.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they're saying, are traditional teaching methods becoming obsolete in a world full of digital natives?
Which brings us to that article by Mark Prensky.
Oh, yeah, the one you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
What was his main argument again?
Well, basically, he's saying that trying to teach digital natives with traditional methods is like trying to talk to them in a completely different language.
Whoa.
He thinks their brains are literally wired differently because they've grown up surrounded by technology.
That's kind of a radical idea.
It is, and I don't know if I completely agree with him, but it's definitely something to think about.
So what's he saying? Like, we should just throw out all the traditional teaching methods.
Well, he definitely calls for a pretty big shift in education.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important to remember that some of those traditional skills are still super valuable, even in a digital world.
Like what?
Well, critical thinking, problem solving, communication.
Right.
Those are like timeless skills.
They are.
And they're essential for success in pretty much any field you can think of.
That's true.
So I don't think it's about getting rid of those skills.
Yeah.
It's more about finding ways to adapt them to a new context.
Okay. That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, how do we teach critical thinking in a world where information is so readily available?
That is a good question.
Right. And how do we prepare students for jobs that don't even exist yet?
I don't know, but I bet digital pedagogies have something to do with it.
Ah, yes, the mysterious digital pedagogies.
The document kept mentioning them.
They do sound kind of intimidating, don't they?
A little bit.
Like, what even are they?
Yeah. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. So basically, digital pedagogies are ways of teaching and learning that are specifically designed for a digital world.
Oh.
It's not just about using technology in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
It's about using technology to rethink the entire learning process.
Whoa.
Like, instead of just reading about ancient Rome in a textbook,
Yeah.
students could take a virtual reality tour of the Colosseum.
Oh, that's cool.
Right. And that's just one example.
I'm starting to get it.
Digital pedagogies can be anything from flipped classrooms to game-based learning to online collaboration platforms.
Oh, wow.
The key is to use technology in a way that actually enhances learning and makes it more relevant and engaging for students.
I love it.
So it's not about replacing teachers with robots.
Okay, good.
It's about giving teachers new tools and strategies to help their students succeed.
I can get on board with that.
But I think it's also important to acknowledge that This is a lot for teachers to take on.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, where do you even begin to integrate all of this stuff into your teaching?
Right. It can feel really overwhelming.
And that's where this idea of TPACK comes in.
TPAC, what's that?
So it stands for Technological Pedagogical Content Knowledge.
Okay.
It's basically a framework for understanding how to effectively integrate technology into teaching.
Interesting.
So think of it like this.
Okay.
You want to bake a cake.
I do love cake.
Right. Well, you need the right ingredients.
Yeah, like flour and sugar and stuff.
Exactly. That's your content knowledge.
Okay.
Then you need the right recipe.
So you don't mess it up.
Right. Those are your pedagogical skills.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, you need the right oven.
To bake it in.
Exactly. That's your technology.
Okay, I think I'm following.
So teachers need to understand their subject matter.
Yeah.
They need to know how to teach it effectively.
Right.
And they need to know how to use technology to enhance both of those things.
So it's like a three-legged stool.
Exactly. You need all three legs to be strong in order for the stool to stand up.
That's a good analogy.
Right. And the same goes for teaching with technology.
So TPACK is basically our recipe for good teaching in a digital world.
Pretty much.
Like it.
And it's something that all teachers should be thinking about no matter what subject they teach or what grade level they work with.
Okay, that's good to know.
Right. Because at the end of the day, it's all about preparing our students for the future.
Which is looking more and more digital every day.
It is. And that's both exciting and a little bit scary.
I agree.
But I think if we approach it thoughtfully and intentionally,
yeah,
we can make sure that technology is a force for good in education.
Okay. I like the sound of that.
Me too. Now, how about we take a little break?
Yeah, good idea.
And then when we come back, we can dive into those YouTube links you mentioned.
Sounds good to me.
Those should give us some really interesting perspectives on all of this stuff we've been talking about.
I'm excited to see what they have to say.
You too. All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Okay. See you in a few.
All right, so we're back and ready to keep digging into this whole digital world thing.
Yeah. Where were we?
Well, you know how that Session 8 technology.pdf thing kept bringing up this idea of like, where do we stand on all of this?
Right. Like, are we supposed to be all gung-ho about every new gadget that comes out?
Exactly.
Or should we be like hiding in a cave somewhere?
You know, trying to escape the digital takeover.
Yeah. Like the document even used those terms, digital evangelist versus digital Luddite.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say, those are pretty loaded terms.
They are. But they make you think, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like a simple black and white kind of thing.
No, not at all. Like, I definitely see the incredible potential of technology.
Oh, absolutely.
But I also recognize that it's not like some magical solution to all our problems.
Right.
Like, it's all about using it thoughtfully and intentionally, I think.
Couldn't agree more.
What about you? Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Well, I think I'm somewhere in the middle, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I see the value of technology, but I'm also wary of its potential downsides.
That's fair.
Like, we have to be careful not to let it take over our lives.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
It's all about balance.
Balance, exactly. You know what else I thought was really interesting from that Session 8 document?
What's that?
It was asking about the implications of using terms like digital native and digital immigrant.
Oh, yeah. Like, are those labels even helpful?
Right. Or are they just creating unnecessary divisions?
That's a good question.
Because I know plenty of people who totally defy those stereotypes.
Me too.
Like my grandma.
Yeah.
She's 80 years old.
Wow.
And she is more tech savvy than some of my millennial friends.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It is. Like, she's always texting me emojis and stuff.
Oh, that's so great.
It's hilarious. But it just goes to show that it's not really about your age, you know?
Totally. It's more about your individual experiences and learning styles.
Yeah, exactly.
And honestly, I think it's more helpful to focus on understanding those individual differences rather than getting hung up on labels. Like, let's try to see the world from each other's perspectives.
Okay, I like that.
You know, regardless of whether we grew up with dial-up internet or smartphones.
Right, makes sense.
Now, speaking of different perspectives, I'm kind of curious to dig a little deeper into that Mark Prensky article.
Oh, yeah. The one who said traditional teaching methods are like a foreign language to digital natives.
Exactly.
That was a pretty bold statement.
It was.
Yeah.
I mean, he's basically arguing that their learning styles and expectations are just fundamentally different.
Yeah.
Because of their constant exposure to technology.
That makes sense.
Like, he even uses this analogy on page 4.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
About how trying to teach digital natives with traditional methods is like speaking to them in a completely foreign language.
Right.
And I don't know if I completely buy that analogy, but it definitely highlights the need for educators to be aware of these shifting learning styles and expectations.
Yeah, for sure. Like, things are definitely different now than they were when we were in school.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, we didn't even have the internet back then.
I know. And Prensky even went so far as to say that educators who don't adapt risk becoming irrelevant. Like, they could get left behind.
Oof. Yeah, that's a tough one to swallow.
It is. But do you think he's right?
Well, it definitely gets your attention.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it highlights the need for educators to be aware of these shifting learning styles and expectations that come with this digital world.
For sure. Like, it's not like we can just ignore technology.
No, definitely not. But I also think it's important to recognize that many traditional teaching methods still hold value, even in this digital age.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like those fundamental skills we were talking about earlier?
Exactly, like critical thinking, problem solving, communication.
Right. Those are always going to be important.
They are, no matter how much technology changes the world.
Okay, so it's not about throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to adapt those traditional skills to a new context.
Okay, I like that.
And I think that's where those digital pedagogies we were talking about earlier come in.
Oh, yeah, right?
Like, remember how we were talking about how they're not just about using technology in the classroom, but they're about actually rethinking the entire learning process.
I'm starting to see how it all ties together.
Yeah, it's all connected. Like, imagine a flipped classroom.
Okay.
Where students watch lectures online at their own pace.
Yeah. At home or wherever.
Exactly. And then they use class time for more interactive activities and discussions.
That's interesting. I like that it gives students more control over their learning.
Right. And then there's project-based learning.
Oh, yeah.
Where students use technology to research and collaborate and create projects that demonstrate their understanding.
Oh, yeah. Like, instead of just memorizing facts and figures.
Right. Like, they're actually applying what they're learning and building real-world skills.
Yeah, that's great.
Like collaboration and digital literacy.
Those are super valuable skills these days.
They are. So it's not just about using technology for the sake of using technology.
Right.
It's about using it in a way that enhances learning and makes it more relevant and engaging for students.
It's all about intentionality.
Exactly. And I think that's a good segue into our next topic, which is TPACK.
Oh, yeah. That thing we were trying to figure out before the break.
Yeah. So remember how we were talking about the importance of teachers having the skills and knowledge to effectively integrate technology into their teaching? Well, TPACK is basically a framework for understanding how to do that.
Okay, so break it down for me one more time.
All right, so TPACK stands for Technological Pedagogical Content Knowledge.
Okay.
And it's basically about recognizing that effective teaching with technology requires a blend of three things.
What are they?
First, you got to have your content knowledge.
Like knowing your stuff.
Exactly. Then you need your pedagogical skills.
So like knowing how to teach.
Right. And then you need an understanding of how technology can enhance both of those things.
Okay, so it's about bringing those three things together.
Exactly. Like, it's not enough to just be good at using technology.
Right.
You also need to know how to use it effectively to teach your subject matter.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does, right? And TPACK provides a framework for thinking about how to do that.
Okay, so I think I'm finally starting to get what TPACK is all about.
Good. Because I think it's a really important concept for any teacher who wants to use technology effectively.
Okay.
It's about being intentional and thoughtful in our approach.
Makes sense.
Right. Like, we don't want to just throw technology into the classroom for the sake of it.
No, we want to make sure it's actually enhancing the learning experience.
Exactly.
Okay, so are you ready to dive into those YouTube links now?
Let's do it. Remember the first one? There's that video as Mark Prensky.
Oh, yeah, the guy who wrote that article.
Right. I think it'll be interesting to hear him elaborate on his ideas in his own words.
Okay, yeah, let's see what he has to say. All right, so we're about to watch this video of Mark Prensky, the guy who wrote that article, arguing that traditional teaching methods are like speaking a foreign language to digital natives. Before we hit play, what are you expecting to hear from him?
Well, you know, knowing Prensky's work, I anticipate he'll double down on his call for a radical shift in education. He's been a vocal advocate for embracing digital tools and pedagogies to meet the needs of what he calls the digital native generation.
Makes sense. I wonder if he'll address the counter-arguments we discussed earlier. You know, the idea that some traditional skills are still essential even in a digital world.
That's a good point. It would be interesting to hear his take on that. He might argue that those skills need to be taught in new and innovative ways, using the tools and technologies that digital natives are familiar with.
Okay, let's hit play and see what he has to say.
Okay.
I'll pause it right there. He's talking about the need for teachers to become digital mentors rather than traditional instructors. What do you think he means by that?
I think he's suggesting that teachers need to shift their role from being the primary source of knowledge to being facilitators and guides in a digital learning environment.
Okay.
Instead of standing at the front of the classroom lecturing,
Yeah.
They need to be comfortable working alongside students, helping them navigate the digital landscape and encouraging them to explore and experiment with new tools and technologies.
So it's less about teachers imparting knowledge and more about them helping students to become independent learners in a digital world.
Exactly. It's about empowering students to take ownership of their learning, to curate their own information, and to collaborate with others in meaningful ways.
That makes a lot of sense. It aligns with what we were talking about earlier, this idea of moving away from a teacher-centric model of education to a more student-centered one.
Okay,
let's keep watching. Oh, this is interesting. He's talking about the need to rethink assessment in a digital age. He's saying that traditional methods, like standardized tests, don't accurately measure the skills and knowledge that are important for success in a digital world.
You know what? That's a really good point.
It is, right. Like, if we're asking students to collaborate, create, and problem solve using digital tools, then shouldn't we be assessing those abilities?
Absolutely. We need to find new ways to measure skills like digital literacy, critical thinking, and creativity. Prensky is suggesting that portfolios of student work, project-based assessments, and even online simulations might be more appropriate in a digital learning environment.
I like that. It makes a lot of sense. It's about aligning assessment with the goals and methods of instruction.
Right. And it's about recognizing that learning is a continuous process, not just something that can be measured by a single test score.
Right. Okay. So Prensky's video has given us a lot to think about when it comes to the role of teachers and assessment in a digital age. Now, let's check out that other YouTube link you mentioned, the one that might offer a different perspective.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm curious to hear what other voices are contributing to this conversation.
Okay, so she's arguing that we shouldn't get so caught up in the hype about digital natives and future content that we lose sight of the fundamental purpose of education. What do you make of that?
I think it's a really valid point. It's important to remember that technology is a tool, and it should be used to support the goals of education, not to dictate them,
And she's also saying that we need to be careful not to create a digital divide, where students who have access to technology and those who don't have vastly different educational experiences.
Oh, that's a crucial point. Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not enough to simply provide students with technology. We need to ensure that all students have equitable access to digital learning opportunities and that they're equipped with the skills they need to thrive in a digital world.
I'm really glad we watched this video. It's a good reminder that this isn't just about embracing technology for technology's sake. It's about using it thoughtfully and intentionally to create a more equitable and engaging learning experience for all students.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between the old and the new, between traditional teaching methods and digital pedagogies, between access and equity. That's a lot to juggle.
It is. Well, this deep dive has certainly given us a lot to think about. We've explored the impact of technology on teaching and learning, the generational divide in digital habits, the rise of digital pedagogies, and the ethical considerations surrounding technology and education.
Yeah, and we've only just scratched the surface. This is a vast and complex landscape that's constantly evolving. It feels like every day there's something new to consider.
It really does. But I think we've gained some valuable insights from the sources you provided, especially those thought-provoking YouTube videos.
I agree. And I hope this deep dive has inspired you to continue exploring this topic and to consider your own role in shaping the future of education in a digital world. It's a conversation that affects all of us.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to continue exploring these questions and to share your own thoughts and experiences with us. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities facing education in a digital age? We'd love to hear your perspectives.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those connections strong.